The bodies screamed when we brought them back. Each time we brought the recently deceased back from the dead, they screamed. We didn't know why. The studies and preparation made sense in theory, and yet they screamed. Every time we injected the serum into a cadaver, it would awaken violently, thrashing if it hadn't been strapped down, and scream until it expired. I worked at a facility, one that specialized in the study of prolonged longevity, death, and the possible resurrection of dead tissue. We had developed a new compound that appeared capable of repairing and regenerating damaged cells back to full vitality. All our tests on animals showed miraculous results, lifespans extended by years, and in several cases, subjects were brought back from recent death. One rabbit, who came to us at the age of 12, lived for another 10 years within the lab. Once we were satisfied with the results, we began discussing human testing. Before moving on to live subjects, we wanted to see if we could bring back the recently deceased. We submitted the necessary requests for cadavers and, after navigating a mess of paperwork and red tape, established a steady stream of bodies kept on ice. The individuals sent to us had died from known diseases and had been marked for scientific use. We tried to ensure that the brain had not fully degraded, so we required the bodies to be no more than a few days, at most a week, post-mortem. The first test was catastrophic. Generally, when we applied the serum to animals, the body would convulse slightly and, as if waking from sleep, the creature would open its eyes and look at us. One dog we tested even wagged its tail in excitement at the sight of us. But for the first human subject, excitement was the last thing on its mind. We laid the male subject out on a table, modesty underwear placed on them for decency. Once prepared, we injected the compound at the base of the skull and waited, usually 30 seconds to a minute, for the serum to begin rebuilding neural tissue. Our theory suggested we'd awaken a conscious person, albeit brain dead. Our hope was to see them fully restored. Both were wrong. The subject tensed its entire body before a wave of movement flowed from the neck, down the arms, and through to the feet, as if, in one smooth motion, the soul had slid back into its flesh. The hands gripped the sides of the table, the head twitched, every muscle fiber firing in chaotic, distorted spasms. His heartbeat began to pulse on our equipment, sending freshly created blood through the body. We watched in stunned amazement as the body took a long, deep breath. We smiled at the results. We did it. Suddenly, it lurched forward, its upper half snapping upright like a sprung trap, its face contorted, mouth gaping wide, eyes bulging from their sockets, nostrils flared. Then the screaming began. It was a distorted scream, not unearthly, though it could be described as such. But that was only because the sound destroyed its own vocal cords and esophagus under the sheer strain of what it was trying to emit. It was the sound of an animal fighting with every fiber of its being to escape. The scream filled the small room, reverberating through the glassware, tearing through me and likely everyone present. It peaked as the body began to shake violently, its hands clawing at its own flesh, as if something unseen had gripped it from the inside. The legs trembled with frenetic energy, as if they were desperate to run before twisting violently to one side. A sickening crack signaled the snapping of the hip. The body collapsed, falling from the table, its head striking the cold floor with a wet smack. The screaming dragged on for another 5 frail seconds, then stopped with a final broken whimper. Revitalized blood began to pool from the fractured skull, the leg bent at an unnatural angle. The noise that had escaped from that corpse felt like something being burned alive or torn apart. Not that I know what those things sound like, but I imagine that would be the closest approximation. I wanted to end the test there and then, but the others insisted. We'd had a breakthrough, and we had to see it completed. With the second subject, we took no risks. He was strapped tightly to the bench before we began. Another male, mid-40s, dead from a heart attack. My own body tensed in anticipation of what was to come. The injection was administered, and, much like the first, the body responded with small, twitching bursts of energy before the spasms began. Bound at the limbs and forehead, its movements were restricted, but not silenced. No amount of hearing protection could shield us from the guttural growls and screams that forced their way out of the subject's throat. The entire table rattled beneath him, restraints tightening and tearing deep into the flesh as freshly reanimated blood began to leak from the wounds. Between each shriek and convulsion, the mouth snapped open and shut violently until the tongue was chewed and torn apart. The subject choked on his own blood less than a minute after revival. We had been instructed to intervene only if the subject could be reasonably calmed. If they expired again, the company would simply supply more bodies and more funding. It didn't matter the sex, the race, the build, the age, the health before death, or how they died. They all came back screaming. After staggering through weeks of what could only be described as unholy experiments, we began testing different methods to sedate and prolong the body's post-reanimation. One attempt stood out. We purposely severed the vocal cords of a cadaver before revival, hoping to silence the inevitable screaming. She was a woman, middle-aged and already pale from death. When she awoke, there were tears already welling in her eyes, as if her mind remembered something her body hadn't yet caught up with. Her breathing came fast and shallow, accelerating into panicked, rasping sobs, wet, desperate gulps of air like someone drowning in the open. Though she couldn't scream, the sounds she made were worse. Muffled cries slipped from her ruined throat, each one a garbled echo of agony that sent shivers through every person in the room. The moans of pain, of disbelief, grief, recognition. Her eyes darted wildly, bloodshot and filled with terror, locking onto each of us in turn as if begging for help or mercy, perhaps both. She tried to lift her arms, but the restraints held her down. Instead, she writhed, shuddering uncontrollably, her body convulsing in silent torment. The tears flowed freely now, tracking down her cheeks in trembling rivulets. We had silenced her voice, but we hadn't silenced the pain. If anything, it made it worse, watching her suffer without the outlet to scream. The room was filled with the sound of breath and whimpers, and something else. A low, involuntary whine that came not from her, but from one of the assistants, curled slightly in the corner, unable to look. We disposed of the subject humanely. The effect on the staff was undeniable. Conversation shortened, small talk faded, and laughter disappeared entirely. The jokes we once shared over coffee about playing God felt horrific, even dangerous to say aloud. Soon, silence became our default. We spoke only when necessary and only about work. Every day we showed up, ran the tests, documented the results, and went home. No one asked questions. The sense of camaraderie we'd built during the animal trials dissolved. The feeling of triumph, of being on the cusp of something extraordinary, turned to quiet dread. The resignations came quietly, one by one. No formal farewells, just an empty desk the next morning. Their replacements arrived with wide eyes and excitement, but that never lasted long. Due to the confidentiality clauses in our contracts, I wasn't allowed to contact any of them after they left. I never found out what happened to most of them, but I do remember one clearly. James, a close friend of mine. He was quiet in his final weeks at work, barely spoke, barely ate. Then one day he didn't come in. Then I saw the news. He had jumped from the top of his apartment building. I thought about quitting. I really did. But the raise they gave me was too good to leave. Our results were yielding nothing. Every subject we brought back either screamed, wailed, or violently thrashed before eventually expiring or being put down. With permissions, we began to explore the unconventional. We dabbled in pseudoscience and religious dogmata, anything that might offer an answer science could not. The people we brought in were paid obscene amounts and sworn to absolute secrecy. Toward the end, even threats were issued. One hypnotist, an odd woman with steady hands and tired eyes, was brought in to help calm the subjects. Her role was to attempt to induce a calm state as we gradually reanimated, stimulating isolated regions of the brain one at a time while keeping the rest dormant. For a while, it seemed promising. We ran countless sessions, and on one occasion, after several attempts and enough sedatives to drop an elephant, a subject stirred gently under hypnosis. There was a breath, a shallow, ragged gasp of pained air squeezed through clenched teeth. Then a single word. Why? It was faint, barely audible, a tremble of soul-deep confusion and grief. And then the screaming returned, more feral and violent than before. The subject convulsed so hard the restraints tore deep into the flesh. The hypnotist never returned after that session. She didn't even collect her final pay. After her, we were truly desperate. We brought in a priest, an aging man with a cautious demeanor, willing to participate in hopes of finding some sort of answer. None of us were superstitious, but something in the screaming had begun to strip away our rationality, our sense of detachment. It felt as though each reanimation peeled back another layer of our humanity, leaving something hollow and shaking beneath. The priest performed a full exorcism over the cadaver as it reanimated. He held a crucifix above its chest and muttered Latin gospels with trembling conviction. Strangely, the body responded. It strained violently against the restraints, muscles taut as steel cords, but it didn't scream. Not at first. The priest's words seemed to still it, but only for a moment. Then the corpse snapped upright with terrifying force, tearing free of the table as metal bolts ripped from the floor. It lunged, flailing wildly. The priest stumbled back, narrowly avoiding a crushing blow to the head, and managed to escape with no significant injury. What followed was not panic, but fury. He shouted at us, eyes wild, accusing us of blasphemy. "You're dragging sinners from hell," he screamed. "You're summoning torment, not salvation." His voice cracked as he ranted and raved, his tone eerily echoing the corpses we'd brought back. Then he left, stormed out of the facility, never to return. From that point on, armed guards were stationed in every session. Not that it mattered. The sessions didn't last long after that anyway. For one final try, one more attempt to gain any understanding, we turned away from the mystical and into even more eccentric science. We selected an elderly subject, late 90s, died of natural causes. A quiet death with no visible trauma. We surgically detached his spinal column from the base of the brain, severing all motor function. The body was essentially quadriplegic, incapable of movement or speech. Only the essential organ connections were maintained. Then we installed a neural interface, an experimental chip connected directly to the brainstem and visual cortex, linked to a computer in the adjacent observation room. It was programmed to interpret neural signals and convert them into written text. Only a few of us remained by this point. We sat in silence behind the thick glass, monitors glowing faintly in the dim observation room. The only other person present inside the subject's room was the armed guard, now a permanent fixture with orders to terminate the subject immediately if necessary. We administered the injection and waited. There were no spasms, no strained limbs, no hideous sounds of vocal cords tearing. Just the soft rhythmic beep of a heart restarting and the subtle rise and fall of a chest-drawing breath. The room was so silent, it felt as though the screams of the previous cadavers echoed from memory into the still air. Then the text flashed on screen, "Where am I?" We froze. Even though it was only text, something in my mind gave it life. I heard the voice behind it. An old man, tired, confused. We typed back, "Who are you?" "John Forrester, who are you?" "We're here to help, John. How old are you?" 96, who are you?" The information matched. We were finally getting somewhere. Then the next message appeared. "Are you him?" We paused. "Who?" There was a long silence. Then, "You're not him? No, no, no." John's heart rate began to climb. The breathing grew rapid. His test flashed again. "You're not supposed to know." We stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. My assistant looked at me, her mouth slightly open, but I said nothing. "You're not supposed to know," he repeated. I looked through the window. John's eyes were open, wide, wet, unblinking. Tears streamed down his cheeks, pooling on the slab beneath. It shouldn't have been possible. "He won't let me back. You're not supposed to know." The cursor blinked. I turned to the screen again, only to see another message. "He won't let you." Pause. "He won't let you." Again and again and again. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, matching the beats per minute displayed on the monitor. My breathing grew shallow. Then I heard something. Not in my mind. Real sound. I looked up. John's mouth was moving. Impossible. His nerves were severed. His lips parted wider. Sound emerged. Quiet at first, but real. Tangible. "He won't let you." I froze. I shouldn't be able to hear it through the glass, but I heard it. The guard looked to me for the termination signal. I shook my head. Not yet. "He won't let you." The whisper grew in volume, ragged and forced from a throat that should have been silent. "He won't let you. He 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 won't let you." The gunshot was final, absolute. The sound rang out across the lab like a gavel striking the lid of a coffin. John's body slumped against the slab, what remained of his expression frozen in wide-eyed agony. The guard, shaking, holstered his weapon and left the room without a word. The silence that followed was suffocating. I collapsed back into my chair. My ears rang, not from the shot, but from the absence of everything else. No monitors, no voices, no screams. Just silence. I didn't know what to report. I didn't know what I just witnessed. The project was terminated soon after, officially deemed a dead end. We were compensated generously. Bonuses, severance, hush clauses buried in legalese. More than enough to vanish, to start over, to never work again. But money does nothing for the silence. I sit here now, alone, typing these words, surrounded by a silence so heavy it feels alive, suffocating, endless. To fill that silence, my mind conjures John's voice lingering on his words. I now wish for the screaming instead. I'm a janitor, and I accidentally participated in the Harvard wormhole experiment. They gave me $1 million to keep my trap shut, and I did, for 15 years. But last night, I was making the rounds, and I saw the professor again. I had a heart attack 3 years back, and I tell you, when I saw him standing there in front of room 204, I felt another one coming on. He turned and smiled, and it was like he hadn't aged a day in 15 years. "Hey there, Chief," he said, and that was it. I dropped my clipboard on the ground and hightailed it out of there, never looking back. What I'm about to tell you is liable to make me sound crazier than a 3-horned goat, but I promise you, there's crazier things out there. The cops don't believe me. The official story is that the professor and those students died 15 years ago. Room 204 just up and exploded, they said. Damnedest thing. And there's some truth there. That room did explode. But it wasn't an accident. We knew exactly what we were doing. Or we thought we did. They call me an assistant supervisor of maintenance. But really, I'm a janitor and always have been. You might wonder why I'm still at it after getting that $1,000,000. That dough is for Junior, so he doesn't have to go through the same shit that I did. The night this happened, I was assigned to the Astrophysics Center, a bit northwest of the main Harvard campus. Until that night, this was always my favorite beat. I mean, God help you if you wound up at one of the biology labs. Those goddamn dead, cut open animals all over the place used to give me nightmares. And really, thinking back, I'd take those nightmares of mutilated and scattered organs any night over the stuff that has haunted me ever since. Anyway, I was there mopping the hallway on the second floor of the lab building when the door to room 204 opened up and this guy popped his head out. "Hey, you." I looked around to make sure he was talking to me. "Yes, can I help you, sir?" I thought he was going to bitch about the room being a mess or something. "How'd you like to make $1,000, Chief? An hour's work at most. Easy money. Does that sound good to you?" It sure did. Things were tight at home, as they always were. 1,000 would knock off some of those long overdue bills. But I was also on a tight schedule. They didn't give you much breathing room. Don't want you standing around thinking about it all, I guess. "That sounds great, sir," I said, "but I gotta stick to my beat." The man laughed. "We're about to make history, Chief," he said, "and you're worried about emptying the bathroom trash? Come on, don't sweat it. You won't get in trouble, I promise. I'm a professor here. I'll vouch for you." The guy did look like a professor, with carefully combed gray hair and big old glasses on his face. I shrugged, leaned my mop against the wall, and said, "Sure. What do I have to do?" "That's fantastic. Come on in, Chief, come on in." I followed him into the room. One look, and I should have just turned around then and there and told him to keep his damn money. But I didn't. As soon as I stepped in, I felt the little hairs all over my body stand up. I don't mean I was scared. I mean like there was an electrical charge in that room, and I had a guess about where it was coming from. There in the center of the room, on a round table, was a large glass globe, crackling with electricity, like what you see if you go into a kid's science museum, like they somehow created a lightning storm in a glass ball. This one was sort of vibrating around on its stand and buzzing, and the lightning inside was black. I could feel the electricity coming from it from across the room. There were 4 kids there, students, I guessed, sitting in a row of chairs along one wall. More than sitting, they were strapped into those chairs, with metal things over their heads like those big bowl things you see at a hair salon. They all had their eyes closed. I said, "What's going on here? Those kids okay?" "They're quite fine," said the professor. "As to what is going on, as I said, we are about to make history. We are going to open the first wormhole." "Wormhole?" I said, "like in the movies?" The professor laughed. "I suppose so, Chief," he said. "Now listen, we had a last-minute cancellation, but that's okay because it's an easy job. We're going to be kicking things off here shortly, and once they are properly kicked off, the wormhole will open. I will enter. If I am not back in 30 minutes, you are to pull that lever there, and this will close the wormhole." I looked to where he was pointing, at a big red lever attached to a giant, whirring machine that was hooked up to the metal balls over the students' heads. "But, won't you be trapped on the other side of the wormhole?" I asked. Not that I had the slightest idea about what the hell was going on. "Just so, Chief," said the professor. "We've got this down to 2 possibilities. 1, the wormhole opens up to what we're calling the second universe. The best way that I can explain this possibility is that there is a different reality that exists on the other side of this one, the other side of an invisible wall. The wormhole will provide a door in that wall. And the other possibility? That the wormhole will open to a place that man was not meant to go. 30 minutes will give me enough time to get in and out if the first possibility is true. And if it's the second? Then you'll close the hole with that lever, and my students will destroy my work. This was all way above my pay grade, and my head was spinning. Why only two possibilities? How the hell did they come up with those two? And if this real, why the hell would the professor take a coin toss chance of getting stuck in the place that man was not meant to go? I mean, those were just starter questions among the swarm that was buzzing around my head. I see that you have some reservations, said the professor. I assure you that your only job is to pull that lever after 30 minutes. That's it, Chief. We'll take care of the rest, and anything that happens isn't on you. The documentation is quite in order. He tapped a folder that was sitting on the circular table. And here, I'll write you a check now, before we proceed. As he wrote out the check, I wondered if it would still be valid if he got swallowed up by the wormhole. I actually had that thought. As crazy as it sounds, it was still all so weird and abstract to me at that point. Here, he said, handing over the check. Let's do it, Chief. As soon as I enter that hole, give me exactly 30 minutes, on the dot. That's all you have to do. I took the check, mumbled a thanks, and watched as he walked over to the machine. He pulled the lever. There was a loud crackling sound, and I watched in unease as one by one the students' eyes shot open. There were no pupils there, like their eyes were rolled back in their sockets. Hey now, I said, taking a step towards the machine. They are quite fine, said the professor, I assure you. Their jaws started to move like they were grinding their teeth. The professor took a jar of neon blue liquid from a shelf on the wall. He unscrewed the lid and poured the stuff over the electric globe on the round table. The thing started going crazy, and then the globe shattered completely, bits of glass flying through the air as shoots of black lightning zapped out into the room. I ducked down. I had had enough by then and was ready to get the hell out of there. Then it happened. A fucking black hole appeared in the middle of the room, sucking in the bolts of electricity. It grew larger and larger until it took up half the room. All I could hear was this rushing sound like the world's largest vacuum cleaner running at full throttle. Remember, Chief, shouted the professor, with a wild look on his face. 30 minutes exactly. Then he stepped into the thing and was gone. At first my mind was a mess, staring at that whooshing black hole that seemed hungry to suck everything in. I looked at the kids hooked up to the machine, their eyes rolled back, white holes, I guess they looked like, their jaws grinding away like crazy. It was too much to make sense of. I looked down at my watch. 15 minutes and 31 seconds had gone by since the professor got swallowed up by the wormhole. My heart was pounding, and I kept pacing back and forth, trying to work out what the hell was going on. Then I started to zero in on it. I was getting pranked. Not a prank like we used to do as kids, setting dog shit on somebody's front steps and all that idiocy. I mean a prank like the sophisticated college folk do, where they tell you something's going on, but the whole point is to just observe your reaction. A psychological experiment. Probably cameras in here watching me right now. See what I do. 12 minutes to go. I saw a trickle of blood come down from one of the kids' nose. I leaned down to look at him closely. He was shaking a little bit, all over. If I throw that lever, this will all probably stop. Maybe that was the test. I had to decide between trapping the professor in the black hole and saving the kids hooked up to the machines. None of it was real, of course, but they didn't know that I knew that. But then, screaming in the back of my mind, was that voice. What if it's real? 10 minutes to go. The professor had promised me that the kids were all right. Another one started bleeding from the nose. If it wasn't real, it was a hell of a trick. Where did the professor go, if not through that black hole? I thought about touching it, but whenever I got close, I was filled with total terror. It sure seemed real, like it really took you someplace far, far away from here. I walked over to the table and picked up the folder that was there. Just like the professor had said, the first page was instructions to shut down the machine and destroy it if he didn't return within 30 minutes. I flipped that page over, and the next one had a photograph of one of the students. I read what it said. It was a consent form. I, Jackson Stewart, acknowledge the possibility of my imminent death if I participate in this experiment. I am prepared to give my life to science. I flipped that page, and there were 3 more just like it. Now, I'm no lawyer, but there was no way in hell that this experiment was legal if it was real, even with those consent forms. So, it probably wasn't real. And if it was, then the professor lied to me. He had said that the kids were fine. This folder was telling me something else. 2 minutes to go. I took a deep breath and paced the room, watching each second tick by. My mind was telling me that none of it was real, but my gut was screaming in horror. I just looked at my watch. It would be over soon enough, one way or the other. 30 seconds. I walked over to the machine and put my hand on the lever. God damn it. Why is he cutting it so close? I watched the seconds tick by, and I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could risk trapping the professor wherever the hell he had gone off to. 5 seconds. My hand was shaking. 4 seconds. Sweat was pouring down my face, dripping into my eyes. 3 seconds. One of the students started to moan. The one that I saw was named Jackson in the folder. 2 seconds. Oh God, oh God, oh God. 1 second. Jackson started to shake. 0 seconds. Shit. I tensed my muscles to pull the lever. One look at Jackson and I knew I had to pull it. He was violently jerking around now. Wait! I snapped my neck around to see the professor's head sticking out of the black hole. Wait, damn it. Then his shoulders were through. I turned back to Jackson. Blood was pouring out of his eyes. I'm almost through. A second kid started to shake. 1 more second. I looked to see that the professor was through. He was back in the room. Do it, he shouted. 2 things happened after that at the exact same time. I heard a wet popping sound, and I watched as the wormhole disappeared, as though it was never there. But I had never pulled the lever. I slowly turned to look at Jackson. His head was gone. Judging by the bits of brain and splatters of blood on the bowl thing above his neck, his head had just exploded. The whirring of the machine gradually died down, and then it was silent. The 3 kids who were still alive stopped shaking and closed their eyes. A tragedy, said the professor, pointing at Jackson with the exploded head, but not for nothing. I've been there. I've seen it. Chief, I've seen it. I hunched over and puked. It was weird, but my first thought was, what a mess I'll have to clean up later. I don't know. I guess my mind had sort of shut down and I was going on autopilot. I was the janitor. I cleaned up messes. That was all I knew. Then it hit me. The reality of what had happened. You son of a bitch, I yelled. You told me those kids would be okay. The professor put this sickening, smug grin on his face. He would have been, Chief, had you pulled the lever at the 30-minute mark as instructed. You told me to wait. Did I? Yes, you fucker. I'm calling the police. I had a walkie clipped to my belt. It wouldn't get me the police, but it would get campus security. I reached for it and had it in my hand when I heard a groan behind me. I turned to see that it was one of the kids. They were waking up. I went over to unstrap them from the chairs. The first kid's eyes blinked open, and when she saw the professor, she started screaming. It's okay, I said. Shh, it's okay, it's all over. She kept screaming, then the second kid woke up. He looked right at me with wide, terrified eyes. Get us out of here, he shouted. I'm working on it, kid, I said, fumbling at the straps. They were on tight. The third kid woke up. It's here, she said. It made it through. Everything's okay now, I said. Your friend didn't make it, I'm afraid, but it's over. I'll make sure the professor pays for what he did to you and your friends. The first kid was still screaming at the top of her lungs. "Get us out of here!" shouted the second kid again. The third kid looked me dead in the eyes and, in a totally calm voice, said, "That's not the professor." "What? Of course it is," I said. "What I saw when I turned to look at the professor will haunt me forever." The professor's mouth was twisting around at odd angles, like something was moving the lower half of his jaw randomly, or like he was trying to get a hair out of his mouth that kept jumping around. The veins on his neck bulged, then sunk back down, then bulged again, so that they were thick as ropes. His wrists were rotating in ways they weren't supposed to rotate, as his arms flailed around wildly. I had the first kid, the screaming one, free. She jumped out of the chair and ran to the door, but her legs were wobbly and she tripped over herself in the middle of the room. I went to work on the second kid, whipping my head around every second to look at the professor. It looked like there was something crawling around under his skin, something big. "Get us out of here!" the second kid shouted yet again. The first kid was still on the ground, screaming. I worked away furiously on the straps. "If you believe in God," said the third kid with an eerie calm, "then pray." I took a glance at the professor, and that's when the first bone burst out of his chest, through his suit. I call it a bone, but it was pure black and dripping with green slime. "As for me," said the third kid, "I do not believe that there is a God, not after what I have seen." The second kid was free and made a run for it. I scooted over to the third kid, but watched as the professor reached out an arm and grabbed the second kid by the top of his head. The professor gave one quick twist and let go. I heard a terrible snap and the kid slumped to the ground, dead. 3 more black bones came out of the professor's chest, dripping. He laughed and bent down to the first kid, who was still screaming, as bones began to poke out of his back like a fucking stegosaurus from hell. "What is that thing?" I asked, as I fumbled at the straps of the last kid. "It does not belong here," said the kid. "No shit," I said, getting one strap free. "But what is it?" "It comes from a terrible place, a place where there is nothing save pain, endless pain, incomprehensible to our minds." "Great," I muttered as I noticed with a sinking heart that the screams from the girl behind me had stopped. Then I heard a wet crunch. I couldn't help it. I looked to see the professor tearing into that poor girl's throat with long black fangs, dripping in green slime. I turned back to the kid, almost done with the straps. Just a few more seconds. "What's your name anyway, kid?" "Claire." "Claire," I said, my mind trying to stay focused. "When I get you out of these straps, I want you to pick up this chair and throw it at that thing, okay? I'll do the same thing, okay? Then we make a run for it. Do you understand? Can you do that?" "I understand," said Claire. "I do hope it works." I did hope it would work too. "We have to make it work, Claire," I said, yanking off the last strap. "Come on." We stood up together, and I reached over to pick up a chair. I hurled it at the professor with all of my strength, and it shattered against his boned back. I heard a terrible shriek then, and watched as Claire's chair followed behind. I grabbed Claire's arm with one hand and reached for my pocket knife with the other. The only way out of that room meant passing by the professor. We started running as I pulled the knife out and flicked it up. The professor stood, still shrieking, as the green slime mixed with the red blood from the kid's throat and dripped down his chin. I took a wild stab at the professor's neck and connected. I kept running with Claire, leaving the knife stuck in the professor's neck, and made it to the door. I had my hand around the knob when I felt Claire pulling away from me. I looked back, helpless, as I saw the professor reach long black claws into her gut. I threw the door open and left her there. Good God, I left her there. I made it outside the lab building somehow. I don't remember how. My mind just sort of shut down as I ran like hell, I guess. I did have the presence to go around and lock all of the doors from the outside. Then I got on the radio to campus security. You guys need to get the police over to the Astrophysics Center fucking ASAP. There was a fucking massacre in there. The front door started to rattle and I heard the god-awful shriek again. Repeat, said a voice over the walkie. Look, I said, call up Lawrence Summers right now. That was the president of Harvard at the time, and I had seen his signature on the papers in that folder with all of the consent forms. Tell him that the wormhole experiment has gone way the fuck south. The rattling at the door stopped. I only prayed that that thing didn't figure out it could just break a window and crawl out that way. This is the janitor, right? Said a different voice on the other end of the walkie. Is this a joke? The wormhole experiment? Have you been drinking? Call Lawrence Summers. If you don't, I promise you that you'll never be able to live with yourself. Do it now. There was a horrible pause. I heard the professor trying the side door now, shrieking once again. 10-4. A fleet of black SUVs pulled up 2 minutes later. A team of heavily armed men jumped out and ran past me, breaking the windows and jumping inside. I heard a stream of gunfire and screams, so many screams, and the professor's horrible shrieks. After a while, it was quiet, and a second team of men jumped through the broken windows. I didn't hear any more gunfire. I felt a hand on my shoulder and whipped around. A man was standing there. I don't remember a single thing about what he looked like, but I remember our conversation. Tell me what happened, he said. I told him the full story, the same one that I've told you. We are prepared to give you a lot of money to sign an NDA. NDA? Non-disclosure agreement. It means that you can never tell anybody about what happened here tonight. How much? $1 million. And a promotion? The man paused. You mean you still want to work here? After tonight? Somebody's got to clean up the shit, I said. Fine, of course. And one more thing. And what's that? Asked the man. I want to know that this will never happen again. I want you to blow all of that shit up and burn all of the notes. Of course. And I want to watch. Of course, said the man. And so I thought it was over, but it's not. Last night I saw the professor again. He looked me right in the eyes, flashed that smug grin, and said, Hey there, Chief. That's when I ran the hell out of there. The police don't believe me. I've sent 12 emails to Lawrence Summers' assistants. I've called every number that I found listed for him. I haven't heard anything back. I don't know who else to turn to. I'm afraid the professor is going to open the wormhole again, and I'm afraid this time he might bring his friends back with him.